Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to HOPS workshop number 28. I think we're up to now, an additional one in the normal sequence of workshops. On the subject of working at height, I can't play the theme tune today, I'm afraid, because I'm in a different location to where I normally am, so there's no theme tune, which you might think is a good thing or a bad thing. But do let me know if you can hear the sound quality. Oh, thank you, David, for letting me know that you can hear the sound. That's very helpful. So I'm afraid the graphics are not going to be as slick as they normally are, because I've just got my one little laptop and my and one monitor. But do say hello in the comments, and I'll say hello to you as I always do. So hello to David from the Bure Valley Railway for tuning in, and hello Reese Underwood, who I don't know what railway you're from, Reese, but if you let me know, I'll say hello to you. And anyone else who's watching on this additional HOPS workshop, I can see there are quite a few of you watching. Say what organisation you represent, and I will say hello to you. Sorry, I'm just struggling, as always I do, with these things. Okay, so, as I say, no theme tune, unfortunately, so let's get started. First of all, we will just have a quick look at the news. If you didn't see this time last week, we had HOPS workshop with Simon Barber from the ORR talking about RM3 and the e-learning that's now available on the ORR website. So if you haven't already seen that, then I recommend you watch it. It is on Facebook, and as of this afternoon, it's on YouTube as well. You can do the e-learning absolutely for free on the ORR website, and you can watch Simon Barber and I having a nice old chat in HOPS workshop on YouTube or Facebook. Loads more people have joined. Thank you very much. Hello to Will Smith from the Vale of Rydal Railway, I think, Paul Mills from the Cholsey and Wallingford, Phil Summers from the Epping-Ongar Railway, Wayne Dixon from Weardale, hello Johnny Pay from the Spa Valley Railway, Frank Wooldridge from the Vale of Berkeley, is that? Mac Lee from Cholsey, Mark Dodd from the Spa Valley, David Snell from the Vale of Berkeley. Oh, there's a good Vale of Berkeley contingent here this evening. Phil says he's going to miss the theme tune. Oh, well, don't worry. There's many videos on YouTube with the theme tune on. Hello to Ruth from Weardale. Hello to Alan Jones from the Royal Deeside Railway. That's not a railway that we hear from very often, so welcome and thank you very much for joining in. So if you didn't see, last week in the normal progression of workshops, there was ORR, RM3 and e-learning. Today is an additional workshop in the sequence of workshops because of the sudden increase in interest in working at height. Just a reminder, again, if you didn't see it last week, that the migration of expiry dates on competencies to elements is now in progress. Hopefully you've done everything that you need to do and your perfect roles list looks all green. If it doesn't look all green and you've still got some red on it, then you need to take action pretty quickly because the system is going to stop working in the way that you'll be used to it working. If you need any help with this, please let me know. More than happy to sit there on Teams or Zoom and talk you through it and convert what you've got into the new format. Thank you very much to every railway that's taken time to do that and for whom the perfect roles lists all look nice and green. A reminder that there is a consultation out at the moment for some work to take place in calendars and timetables to allow you to have more than one modifier per day. If you haven't already seen that, you can download it from System Updates. It's update 889. I'll be very glad to hear your views and comments, and if you think it's not going to work, particularly if you think it's not going to work for your particular railway in some way or another, then please do let me know, because if you don't, then you can't complain if it stops working for you. Rules of the workshop, as always, they're the same as they've always been now for 28 workshops. Rule number 1, please join in. Please join in, please make comments and ask questions via the Facebook comments, and I'll do my best to answer them as I go along. Share your experience so that others can benefit from it, and do learn from others when they share their experiences. This is deliberately called a workshop rather than a lecture, just to make sure that it's very clear that it's the onus is as much on you to feed into it as it is to me. Although I just obviously quite like talking. The video will be on YouTube afterwards. As I say, just this afternoon I uploaded the video onto YouTube from last week's workshop, and of course they stay on Facebook as well. So for anybody who's not able to tune in the evenings, if you've got any colleagues who might benefit from some of the topics we've discussed, then you can always point them towards the YouTube videos. The aim of all this is to construct a best practice set of SMS templates, which we're doing quite a good job of doing now, save a bit of time where there's duplication of work going on different railways, save a bit of cost, and share best practice. As always, we are not saying that this is what you must do. We are not saying that this is what you must do. We're just saying that this is a set of best practice templates that we've cultivated through our work with all the different railways that we work with, which is now up to 130 something railways, mainly in the UK and partly in Australia. We're also not saying that this is guaranteed to be suitable for absolutely every undertaking. Obviously, there's a wide range of railways out there with a wide range of different risks. So the onus is on you to make sure that if you choose to use some or part or all of the templates, that it is appropriate for the risks that you have at your particular undertaking. We did mention in ORR Hot Topics in Top of the Hops magazine a couple of months ago that we foresaw working at height was massively coming up the ORR's agenda, and this is why we try to sort of publish this information and alert you to what other railways have told us is coming up and is going to get more focus. So if you've never seen a copy of Top of the Hops before, again, you can find it in system updates, or if you ask your Hops admin to subscribe you to whatever permission number it is, 368, I think maybe, in order for you to get emails of HOPS updates. Then you will also receive Top of the Hops magazine, which contains interesting, useful information on matters of heritage railway compliance. We also noticed that a railway got a prohibition notice and it's publicly available, so you can find it yourself, but I'm not going to name them. But there's the relevant parts of the prohibition notice that they received on the right-hand side. That there is a risk to personal injury, and that matters which give rise to that risk are that there are no suitable and sufficient measures in place to prevent or arrest a fall from either carriage roof, and that those matters will involve contravention of the following statutory provisions: Section 2 and 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 and Regulation 6.3 of the Work at Height Regulations 2.5, because there are no guardrails or barriers to prevent a person falling from either carriage roof. This related to two specific carriages. Neither is there in place a personal fall protection system or other safeguards to arrest a fall. This is a prohibition notice that was issued to a heritage railway this year. We know from railways that talk to us, and we're very grateful to those that do and sort of feed information into this news process, that there was at least one heritage railway that had 2 fall from height incidents last year and one that's had 1 fall from height incident this year. In the preamble to last week's HOPS workshop, where we had Simon Barber, we did talk about, offline, we talked about working at height, and Simon did agree that the number of working at height incidents was unsatisfactory and that further interest and scrutiny could be expected, and rightly so, because obviously we want to enjoy our hobbies. We don't want to be served with prohibition notices, and we certainly don't want anyone to be injured falling from height. So it's right that we pay attention to these indicators, and that's why we called this emergency workshop today. We didn't wait for a slot in the programme because, as a result of these things happening, a lot of railways made inquiries to us about what resources we had and how we could help and things like that. And so we've done our best, as you'll see, over the last few weeks to help as best we can. So we'll go over to the template now, and say it's not going to be very slick, I'm afraid. I have to use the same monitor for everything on this workshop. So as usual, I've got you a nice Word document template, which will be available to advanced HOPS subscribers in the workshops section of HOPS soonish, within a week or so after this call. You can find it in the Tools menu and then SMS Workshops. And there's a link to the videos and things. And if you're an advanced HOPS subscriber, then you will also be able to gain access to the Word document templates. And you're welcome to use them in any way that you like. You can take the whole thing, as long as you make sure that it's appropriate for your risks, or you can just chop and change and take out individual paragraphs and sentences that you do or don't like. It's totally up to you. As always, there's a nice cover page for you to either fill in the gaps or replace with your own cover page, and preceding that is just a bit about the fact that this is a template and a big heading saying this is not your organisation's SMS, just to make sure that if anybody finds it at your railway, they don't pick it up and think it's the SMS that they should be following, and understand that it is a template provided for best practice. So we'll read through it in the way that we always do, and as I said in the rules of the workshop, do join in, do make comments, particularly if it's something that you disagree with. That's the best time to speak up, because I'm certainly not saying that I'm right on everything. This is just things that I've found as I've gone along, so we're particularly interested to hear if you have a better or a different idea about how to manage some of these risks. So here we go then, eyes down. Any work carried out at height comes with inherent risks to personal safety. Unfortunately, some aspects of railway work railway specific work require work at height which cannot be designed out, along with more general operations including maintenance that require staff to work at height. This policy is to highlight the risks associated with working at height and activities where working at height is routinely required, with a risk commentary and descriptions of the mitigations in place for them, and the steps to be taken to ensure any other instance of working at height are properly planned and executed. So like with so many things, the paperwork is important. Obviously, we do want to reduce the risk of somebody being injured by a working at height incident, but we also want to reduce the railway's exposure to difficulties / prohibition notices or potentially even prosecution after somebody has had a working at height incident. And being able to demonstrate that we've thought of all the risks, or as many of the risks as we reasonably can, written them all down in a nice policy and conducted risk assessments to support it, will go a long way to providing that railway's defence. It will also go a long way, and I promise this is the case because I've definitely seen it happen myself, to enabling you to identify risks that perhaps you hadn't thought of before. And certainly when I've been through this exercise with other railways, you suddenly look at things with a very different eye and you think, oh my goodness me, I've never thought of the working at height aspect of that particular task before, but now that I am, can we actually apply some measures to make it a little bit safer? So it's a really good exercise to go through as well. What working at height is, or maybe that should be what is working at height. Working at height is any form of work carried out where the persons carrying out that work are not at ground level and are in a position where if they fell, they would be at risk of sustaining personal injury. It includes working on locomotives, carriages, or other rail vehicles, working on scaffolding, working up ladders, including signals, working around pits, working on bridges and structures, working on stairs even, working on platform edges, working on elevated work platforms. So it's just some examples, particularly examples related to things that might go on heritage railways that we thought it would be worth including. Of course, if you have specific things that you do or don't do, and I know one railway that I was talking to about this policy before this workshop, which was a narrow gauge railway, said, well, our locos and carriages, you don't tend to climb on them because you can just stand on the ground and clean the roof or do whatever it is you want to do. So our working at height risks are a little bit different, but we also do put up Christmas lights and dust cobwebs off of canopies and things like that. So best to make the list actually match the particular working at height risks that you routinely incur in your particular undertaking. Risks. Falls during working at height account for approximately 3 in 10 workplace deaths in the UK. The principal risks associated with working at height are falling, being trapped at height, and things falling from height. And being trapped at height relates to things like if somebody's on top of a locomotive and then they faint or have a heart attack or something like that, then it's going to be a very difficult job to bring them down again in order that they can receive the support they need. You potentially might end up calling the fire brigade just to get somebody stretchered down off of the top of a locomotive. Lots of things like this that we don't always necessarily think about in terms of the risks of working at height. But they're all risks associated with working at height, and so we need to consider them all. Thank you very much, David, who's just pointed out not to limit our thinking to just trains and civil engineering, but also think about things like cafes and shops. And he mentions putting up Christmas decorations. But yes, certainly shops where stock is stacked high in stock rooms and people are on rickety step ladders and things like that, definitely to be included in our considerations of working at height risk. As well as the safety risks of the above, there are also considerable financial and regulatory risks to the company from working at height, especially where unsafe or unapproved working practices are employed. So as I mentioned earlier, the personal injury risk, the safety risk, is not the only risk associated with working at height, but there are other business risks involved here as well. Of working at height risk, the company will apply the following hierarchical approach to minimising the risk from working at height. And this is lifted out of the HSE documentation on the subject. This is where we got it from. Number one, avoid. Avoid the need to work at height, e.g. by redesigning the task or the equipment or the process. If the task can be done on the ground or the bit of equipment can be moved onto the ground so that we don't need to work at height at all, then that is clearly going to be the best way of mitigating working at height risk. Number two, prevent. Prevent the risk of falling or being injured by falling items if working at height cannot be avoided. So it is a numerical sequence. This is number two, e.g. by design of working platforms, application of exclusion zones, etc. If we can't avoid the need to work at height, then the next best thing is to do everything possible to prevent the risk of falling or being injured by falling items. So that's proper working platforms with handrails and kickboards, proper scaffolding with proper platforms and ladders, not homemade rickety surfaces that don't prevent the risk of falling. And just like everything, we should all be prepared to justify the decisions of how we've gone through this process afterwards, if somebody were to get injured, to justify how we'd considered avoid and that the work couldn't be avoided, how we'd considered prevent, and whether or not we did everything reasonably possible to prevent. And then third of all, minimize, if we can't do avoid or prevent, minimize the distance or consequences of a fall, e.g. by providing fall arrest equipment or lowering the height at which work needs to be carried out. If we can't avoid, we must prevent, and in fact, if we can't avoid, we must prevent and minimize. Preventing doesn't avoid minimizing, but avoiding is clearly number one and clearly the best tool in the management of working at height risk. Use of ladders. For tasks of low risk and short duration, ladders and step ladders can be a sensible and practical option. The Health and Safety Executive defines a short duration task as a task that does not require staying up a leaning ladder or a step ladder for more than 30 minutes at a time. Low risk would include situations where ladders can be safely sited on smooth, level ground and adequately secured, and where it's not necessary to carry excessive items to do the work. That is what the HSE says about ladders. Use of ladders must comply with the guidelines set within the guidance document issued by the HSE, which I've linked to there. Now, we will, as we go along, we will mention that all staff who undergo working at height must be trained. It's up to us to decide what the level of training is based on the risk, but the HSE does say that people must be trained if they're going to work at height, and specific training for if people are going to use ladders. So it all starts to get a bit sort of involved, but hopefully we will be able to help in providing the tools to assist in the training of working at height through the e-learning tools, which we'll get to in a moment. So the following pages describe the risks associated with key groups of staff. So this is going to be very similar to the lone working policy, which we talked about months and months and months ago, where we're going to now look at each little group of staff on the railway and see if we can mitigate the risks in any way. First of all, footplate crews. Locomotive footplate crews are required to work at height regularly as part of their operational duties. And again, I recognise that this might not necessarily be true for all gauges or scales of steam locomotive. Obviously, if it's not appropriate to you, then you can delete this part of the policy. The tasks involved are working on the footplate, walking along the running plate to access equipment, watering the locomotives on the tank tops or tender, which I have to say is one of the most difficult tasks that we found to avoid, prevent and minimise in this sort of look through working at height on a heritage railway. But there we go. Cleaning or servicing of the locomotive, e.g. emptying the smoke box, cleaning the sides and oiling. Changing the locomotive lamps, which quite often involves an acrobatic driver standing on a tiny little bit of checker plate on a buffer stock and leaning over to try and do the lamps, definitely working at height. And coaling the locomotive. So referring to the hierarchical approach, the company's commentary on these risks is, number one, avoid. It is not possible to avoid working at height in these circumstances while continuing to operate the steam and heritage diesel locomotives, which is one of the company's key objectives. Steam locomotives were not designed with the management of working at height risk in mind, and by their design require operational activities to be carried out at height. Now, I've coloured that in grey because as we look at these different groups of staff, we're going to find some duplication. So to save you getting bored by me reading the same thing out where it applies to different groups of staff. I've coloured in some of the duplicated bits in grey so that you know you've heard that already and I don't need to read it again. Number 2, prevent. So you can see how this policy is going about. We're going to describe and sort of justify how we're applying avoid, prevent, minimise to each of these groups of staff. Prevent. The heritage nature of a railway, along with considerations such as loading gauge, mean that the fitting of guardrails or working platforms are not possible in the majority of cases, especially where the locomotive is in operation. So where you've got water towers at stations and things like that, and it's necessary to climb on top of the locomotive in all different locations, it isn't reasonably practicable to fit working platforms in all of those cases. Now remember here where I put the red text in one of these templates for you, it's where I really want you to either change or fill in the gaps or delete, if not applicable, the text. Obviously that applies to everything, but particularly the bits that I've written in red, because you've got 2 options here. Prevent measures have been applied in maintenance depots, and then you can detail what they are, such as working platforms and handrails and things like that. Or the company is committed to reducing working at height risk and is actively investigating if the prevent principle can be applied to the operational activities in maintenance depots, e.g. design of specialist access equipment for coaling and oiling and cleaning. Now, I've only given you those 2 options. Obviously, it's up to you what you eventually want to type, but the reason I've only given you those 2 options is I think one of them should be true. You should either already have preventative measures, or you should always constantly be dreaming about them and thinking about them and wondering if you could apply them. I don't think it would be very wise there to write, we haven't got any preventative measures, and we're not going to be thinking about providing them. So ideally, one of those 2 red paragraphs will apply. Number 3, minimise. Locomotive crews regularly need to work at height in different locations on a steam locomotive for short periods of time in various locations along the railway, e.g. taking water at station water columns. And therefore provision of fall arrest equipment or task restraint equipment is not currently practicable. Task restraint equipment incidentally stops you getting too close to the edge. Fall arrest equipment stops you from hitting the ground once you have fallen. The risk is, however, minimised by locomotive crews being trained on the risks involved, and let's make sure that our training documentation does pretty heavily mention working at height and what the mitigations are and how you have to be careful, otherwise that sentence isn't true, and being regularly assessed carrying out the task where unsafe behaviours can be picked up and corrected. So again, in a lot of cases, for locomotive crews, there's some sort of observation or ride out or something like that that's done with the assessors. Let's make absolutely sure that the checklist that they go through when they do those ride outs has a observed working safely at height and has had the opportunity to discuss safe methods of working at height option on it, so that we really can demonstrate that that number 3, minimise, is true. And that's especially, I think, important in terms of locomotives, because it's so difficult to avoid, prevent, minimise work on locomotives, especially filling up with water. The following requirements are in place for the activities listed. 3 points of contact. 3 points of contact must be maintained at all times when climbing or moving on the locomotive, except when on the footplate, although crews must be alert to the risks from the motion during travel to cause a fall, and the importance of keeping doors shut on tank locomotives and keeping away from the steps on tender locomotives, and when on top of a tank locomotive or a tender to take water. It's quite a long sentence. In these cases, locomotive crews must pay extra attention to their personal safety and remain well away from the sides. Whenever any other work on top of the locomotive is being done, such as oiling or cleaning, then 3 points of contact should be maintained by sitting down or kneeling, taking care to avoid any hot components. So sitting down or kneeling is a really good way to avoid falling by losing your balance. No lone working. No working at height is to be done alone, with the exception of accessing the locomotive cab. We thought that was a reasonable exception. Steam locomotives must have a minimum of 2 members of staff rostered on them, and other work at height must only be done when at least 2 people are present. Again, for some of the smaller than standard gauge heritage railways, where they don't have a driver and a fireman, it probably won't be true that steam locomotives have a minimum of 2 members of staff rostered on them. Hopefully you will have some other mitigation for the working at height while lone working risk that you can write in there. It is ideal, or it is definitely to be aimed for, to be avoiding working at height when lone working. Changing of lamps. Lamps are not to be put on or removed from the lamp bracket if somebody is working beneath that bracket, e.g. somebody is coupling or uncoupling below the bracket, so as to prevent the risk of lamps hitting staff if dropped. So this is sort of on the periphery of working at height, but it is working at height because the member of staff putting a lamp on the top bracket will be working at height, and there is of course a risk that they can drop the lamp, especially as I described earlier if they're doing some clever acrobatic act to try and reach where the lamp should go by standing on the buffer stock. To mitigate the risks associated with the person changing the lamps working at height, the number of occurrences of lamps being changed should be minimised. Crews are only required to show them for running moves. It is not necessary for lamps to be changed to light locomotive for run-round moves or coming on and off shed. And I know that would be very controversial, and obviously it's not for me to enforce, and if you definitely don't like it, you can delete that sentence. But it is true, and it's certainly historically accurate as well, that locomotives certainly didn't put up light engine head codes to run round, and they usually came on and off shed with the head code of the train they were going to work. So it is a way of reducing the risks associated with working at height, is to minimise the amount of working at height required by minimising the amount of time the driver has to climb up there to change the lamps. As I said, if you really don't like it, you can delete the sentence. Pits. Staff must not take shortcuts by stepping across the pits unless pit boards are in place. And let's make sure that those pit boards are properly maintained as well, so that if somebody steps on them, they don't fall into the pit anyway. Consider weather conditions. Work at height will not be carried out during high winds or very heavy rainfall, where this could affect stability at height. Crews working on tank tops must be careful of slippery surfaces. Okay, so you're beginning to see how this is going to work. On to the next group of members of staff, locomotive maintenance and carriage and wagon staff, and I've highlighted in yellow, including those working on group projects. Because nearly every railway seems to have these sort of quasi-independent groups, and I just want to highlight that unless those groups are their own proper legal entities that have partnership agreements with the railway, that the railway is still responsible for what they do. And in fact, even the groups with which the railway does have formal partnership agreements, if they're working on your site, then they're still part of you. It is unfortunately all too often the case that these little groups become a little bit too independent and start forming their own safety expectations and bank accounts and chairmen and constitutions and all those things, which are generally pretty unhelpful to a centralised management of safety. So let's make sure that this policy, along with every other policy in the SMS, very clearly applies to all the groups that like to think they're independent, but possibly aren't. Locomotive, carriage and wagon staff carry out work on locomotives, carriages and wagons, as well as other activities on the railway. The key areas where working at height is required are maintenance and examination of steam locomotives, e.g. on the top of the locomotive or on the footplate, maintenance and examination of diesel locomotives, e.g. locomotives such as the Class 09, require access to the engine and other components from the running plate. If you know, it's got like wardrobe doors that open on the sides, so you have to stand on the running plate to get to them. A good way of avoiding the need to work at height in that circumstance is to position it alongside a platform, and then we've avoided the need to work at height. Maintenance and examination of carriage and wagon sides and roofs. Major overhaul of locomotives, carriages and wagons. So again, we'll refer to the hierarchical approach that we said we would. The company's commentary on these risks is, number one, avoid, and see it's in grey, it's exactly the same as the avoid for locomotive operations, so I won't read it again. Number two, prevent. All maintenance activities at height are required to use the principles of prevent wherever possible, preventing workers from falling. Elevated work platforms are provided for use in the shed. Sorry, I should have typed this in red. Elevated work platforms are provided for use in the shed to access at height areas of steam locomotives and rolling stock. Scaffold towers are available for medium-term works. Ladders may be used in line with the policy above for very minor short-duration tasks. Again, you will write in there whatever the appropriate prevent measures are for locomotive and carriage and wagon maintenance staff and what you expect them to do. And as we've seen from the prohibition notice that was issued, it's clear that the ORR's interpretation of how we discharge our responsibilities under the working at height regulations 2005 are pretty strict, and that people working unguarded on tops of vehicles is going to earn us a prohibition notice. Minimise. Most working at height risks are managed through the prevention of falling. It's pretty difficult to minimise, or in terms of what we thought, to apply minimise to locomotive maintenance and carriage and wagon staff in a depot. There are some minimisation methods available, such as inflatable bouncy castle things that arrest you when you fall. And I must admit, when we first heard of this, we thought, oh, that sounds like a bit of a joke. But we have heard it said now from authoritative sources that in terms of the management of working at height risk, inflatable bouncy castles, obviously specifically designed for working at height purposes, are considered a better management of the risk than fall arrest or work restraint systems. Obviously, every circumstance where we work at height is different, and it's up to you to decide what the appropriate mitigation measures are going to be. Now, I've written in the minimise, I've written bump caps and highlighted it because there is also a growing feeling that bump caps should be being worn on servicing depots. Again, it's totally up to you to decide whether it warrants the risk or not, but certainly you won't find many mainline depots that you can go to without wearing a bump cap and goggles and gloves and all those other things. And some of the risks are comparable. Certainly there's a lot of things that you stick your head under in a heritage railway locomotive servicing depot, and it's only too easy to lift your head up and bang it into something. Really, the bump caps comment came about from reducing the risk associated with people dropping things on other people's heads, and that can be managed in other ways, such as exclusion zones and things like that. But I just thought I'd put it in there to make sure that you consider it if you choose to use the template or any part of the template. But if it's a bit of a bridge too far for you, then I completely understand. And I also understand that sometimes putting in too heavy-handed or extreme safety measures can have the opposite effect to the effect we want it to have. It can cause people to be switched off and think that it's being taken too far, and sometimes it's necessary to do these things in small steps. Totally understand that. Under no circumstance is work permitted to be carried out on carriage or wagon roofs with no preventative or minimisation measures in place, e.g. provision of 2 tower scaffolds with crossbars or installation of a fall arrest system. And we can pretty confidently write that because we saw the ORR issued a prohibition notice about it. The company always works towards the development and upgrade of its maintenance facilities, and such new or developed facilities will be designed with the avoidance of working at height or provision of strong risk mitigation measures in mind. And it should be, I don't apologise for that paragraph, whenever we develop or upgrade our workshop and maintenance facilities, we should definitely be trying to design out the need to work at height. Following requirements are in place for the activities listed, and they're in grey, so I already read them when I talked about locomotive crews, so I'm not going to read them again, but they're the same things: 3 points of contact, no lone working, not stepping over the pits, and considering the weather conditions. Okay, on we go, page 7 of 12, I promise we're getting there. Guards and shunters. Guards and shunters are required to work at height on rolling stock, e.g. when boarding or alighting from ground level during certain aspects of preparation, operation and disposal. And to be fair, mainly passenger guards might well be getting on and off at platforms, but I'm sure when they prep the set at the beginning of the day, there might be an element of, particularly in doing the brake test, walking along side, climbing up steps, getting in and out of the brake van from the ground level. And also, of course, their responsibilities in an emergency if the train comes to a stand in the middle of nowhere and they have to get on and off it then. Shunters riding on shunting chariots and also on footsteps of shunting locomotives that are specifically designed for the purpose, not just any old shunting locomotive footstep, but one that's specifically designed for the shunter to ride on, is also a good opportunity to fall from height that we should consider. So once again, we'll refer to our hierarchical approach. The company's commentary on these risks is, number 1, avoid. Where possible, access to stock should be made via a station platform. It is not possible to avoid all occurrences, as the nature of the heritage rolling stock means that key components are located at height, e.g. the PCA butterfly valves, the passenger communication apparatus butterfly valves, gangway bellow connections, etc. So we understand again that it's not always possible, but wherever it is possible, we will commit to avoid it. Number 2 and 3, again, I've coloured them in grey so that you don't have to hear the same thing twice. This is the same as we've read previously, the measures for prevent, and that it is pretty difficult to apply prevent to guards and shunters, although certainly making sure that things like the handrails around the shunting chariots and the handrails inside the inward opening doors, which people tend to hang on to, are in good order and have a maintenance regime and are regularly inspected, would actually be a really good thing to put in there in prevent. And minimise, again, very difficult to apply minimisation measures to the activities of guards and shunters. We certainly don't require them or don't want to require them to wear harnesses and be tethered to the train. I'm sure that would create a lot more risks than it would solve. And it's not really practicable to provide the inflatables, so minimisation pretty difficult. But that's not to say, and it's not to say that it's never happened before, that when you issue your policy on working at height, if you don't already have one, then it's time to have one. And if you do already have one, then it's time to remind everybody that members of staff themselves come up with some brilliant ideas that we never thought of when writing the policy. And we should encourage staff to challenge us on brilliant ideas for avoiding, preventing and minimisation that they have thought of that we haven't thought of yet. And I promise it does happen. If you get people whipped up about it, they go, we could prevent this by doing such and such. And of course, sometimes it's an idea that's completely impracticable, but often you think, why didn't we think of that? Brilliant. Thank you very much. You get a mention in the weekly news for improving the railway's safety maturity a little bit more. So the following requirements are in place for the activities listed. This is guards and shunters still, 3 points of contact, same as before. Changing of lamps. So this applies to the changing of tail lamps, but it's the same as changing of locomotive lamps that we talked about above. Don't do it while the fireman's underneath, uncoupling and coupling up. During a run round or loco swap, wait for the detaching locomotive to have moved away from the train before placing the lamp. This reduces both the risk of a fall and the risk of dropping the lamp on the person's head. And again, I know, as I've said many times before, these sentences either might not be fit for you, for your undertaking, or you might just not like them, in which case, obviously, you can take them out and replace them with whatever your mitigation is going to be. Signal and telegraph. Signal and telegraph. There is only one occasion where signal and telegraph staff are permitted to work at height, and that is when maintaining signals, e.g. oiling moving parts or mechanical signals, carrying out inspections, painting signal posts, etc. Referring to the hierarchical approach, the railway's commentary on these risks is, number 1, avoid, as always. The need to work at height to change oil lamps or change incandescent bulbs has been avoided by the company through a proactive programme of lamp replacement with modern LED lamps which require much less maintenance attention. Obviously that's in red, so only say that if that is true, but I know a lot of railways have LED signal lamps now, and for a number of good reasons, and one perhaps even unintended consequence of that is a reduction in the need to work at height, which is really good. The frequency with which it is necessary to work at height attending mechanical failures is reduced by a proactive maintenance regime, which of course we all have for all our signalling equipment. And although it is, although it is necessary to work at height to implement this proactive maintenance, this is done in a more planned and controlled way without the time pressures of attending a failure. The company is also investigating the replacement of oil lubrication of moving parts with grease lubrication, which will further reduce the frequency with which working at height to maintain signals is required. Again, if you're not interested in looking at that, you can delete the sentence, but that was one of the brilliant ideas that was sent in by Railway in the lead up to this workshop. And thank you very much indeed to all the railways that send in either their SMSs or their views and opinions before the workshop, because it is really helpful in making up these best practices. Number 2, prevent. All signals have at least a fall hoop at the top of the ladder and may have a small platform. Bracket signals have a large platform with handrails, although many lack kickboards. Where heavy or lengthy work, e.g. refurbishment or replacement of signals is required, a scaffold tower or equivalent mitigation which has handrails and kickboards is used to prevent persons falling or dropping things. Where this is in a public area, an exclusion zone is also applied. And minimise, and this is what I think most railways will have come up with who have looked into minimisation measures for S&T staff climbing up ladders will have found. Fall arrest systems have been investigated in the past for use where scaffolding isn't provided, e.g. during routine maintenance and inspection of signals. However, Due to the nature of the structures and concerned over the ability to suitably rescue someone suspended on a fall arrest system, these measures were not considered to be reducing the overall risk. So it's not just a case of buying a harness and a bit of plastic blue rope and tying somebody on, because if they fall off like that, when the rope goes tight, they'll break their back. It's got to be an official proper fall arrest system with an official proper harness and official proper rope, and it's got to be hooked on to somewhere proper and official. And let's face it, most semaphore signals don't have the structural integrity to clip on a fall arrest system. Also, then you've got to think about what you're going to do when the person's dangling on the rope and how you're going to rescue them from there. And it is definitely true that if somebody is arrested by a fall arrest system, they're not going to be completely free of injury. And the longer they stay there dangling, the more serious those injuries are going to get. So it's definitely not a brilliant golden bullet solution that you can just fit a fall arrest system. You do have to look into it really carefully. If anyone on this workshop has successfully managed to apply fall arrest systems for S&T staff accessing signals and working at height, then I'll be really interested to hear about them, and I'm sure everyone else would too. So let me know and I'll share it. The following requirements are in place for the activities listed. 3 points of contact must be maintained at all times when climbing up and down signals and carrying out work unless handrail protection on an access platform is provided. No lone working. Lone working at height on signals is not allowed under any circumstances. And remember, that's just me saying that. I can't enforce it in any way. There's no law that says you can't do that. But this is what I would be saying if I was you. In the event that urgent work is required, e.g. attending a fault, and only one member of signal and telegraph staff is available, the duty officer must be contacted so that another member of staff can be arranged to attend before work starts. Just because the risks of lone working going up a signal outweigh any reasonable benefit, we feel, that getting up the signal to fix it can reasonably bring. And any old other member of staff, just to be on site, not to climb up the signal, but to make sure they're there to raise the alarm in an emergency or deal with the person if they get stuck or something like that, will massively reduce the risk. And we couldn't really think of a reasonable circumstance where a signal failure would require such urgent attention as to outweigh the need for somebody to work alone at height. Consider weather conditions. Do not carry out work at height on signals during high winds or heavy rainfall where this could affect stability at height, or of course slipperiness of platforms, especially without kickboards. Okay, permanent way staff. Permanent way staff may be required to work at height when loading and unloading rail vehicles or working on them, e.g. ballast drops with dogfish wagons or weed spraying, conducting permanent way technical tasks on bridges, and carrying out maintenance and inspection of structures and bridges. Referring to the hierarchical approach, as we always will, the company's commentary on these risks is avoid, wherever reasonable, mechanical means are used to carry out loading or unloading activities to reduce the need for staff to work on vehicles. And I would say that this is something that applies even down to the narrow gauge railways. Even if a flatbed or well wagon is only 18 inches or 2 feet above the ground, that's still more than high enough for somebody to trip over on some of the materials, fall off the wagon, and do some pretty serious injury. So we use mechanical means wherever they're available, which of course also helps our manual handling risk as well. Other tasks at height cannot necessarily be avoided, as the nature of the equipment or structures means it is not possible to design out the need to work at height. If you've got to inspect the handrails on the bridge, there's only one place to inspect those, and that's at height. Number 2, prevent. Handrails are fitted to dogfish and the weed killer wagons. And again, only include that sentence if your weed killer wagon does have handrails. And if it doesn't, try and justify why you can't provide them. Weed killer wagons to prevent falls from height. Underlying bridges and structures have handrails to prevent falls from track level, and overlying bridges have parapet walls. Where work at height on bridges or structures is required and handrails do not provide adequate fall protection, e.g. refurbishment of a bridge, then scaffolding or other preventative measures are to be used. This does not exclude the use of ladders in accordance with the policy above for very short duration tasks such as bridge inspections. And minimise. The nature of work carried out means that preventative measures are available. The company does not carry out work on the underneath of bridge arches, etc., and would bring in a suitably qualified and competent contractor to do this work using measures such as rope access, work restraint, or fall arrest systems if required. We perhaps haven't made it clear here that we're talking about particularly high arches such as viaducts and things like that. The company recognises its responsibility in ensuring that such external staff have a safe and risk-assessed method of work which is appropriate for the local risks. We cannot just get a contractor in and say, brilliant, that's it, we don't have to worry about it anymore. We do have to poke our nose in to what their risk assessment is and what their method of work is going to be, and take our role in doing everything reasonably practicable to make sure that contractors' staff don't come to harm, just like we would with our own. The following requirements are in place for the activities listed. 3 points of contact to be maintained at all times when accessing vehicles and when carrying out work on moving vehicles. Restricted access to vehicle operating platforms. Access to the dogfish and weed killer operating platforms is only permitted for use of the equipment at slow speed. Both weed spraying and ballast dropping have to be done at very slow speed, which is when the operators would need to ride on the operating platforms. Let's not fall into the trap of, because it's enormously fun, riding on the platform of the dogfish wagon at 25 miles an hour to get to the site of work, because it's just unnecessary. It is not permitted to ride on vehicles at those vehicles at any other time. On the weed killer wagon, the operator must be seated in the operating chair whilst the vehicle is moving. Lone working at height is not permitted. Again, we couldn't think of any reason why it would be so urgent to fix something at height that couldn't wait for another person to be on site, just to make sure the person isn't working alone. And consider the weather conditions, same as before. We will not carry out this work during high winds or very heavy rainfall where this could affect stability. Station and grounds maintenance. Maintenance work carried out on stations and grounds may sometimes require work to be done at height, ranging from changing light bulbs, painting buildings, and repairs to canopies, roofs, and windows, etc. Referring to the hierarchical approach, the company's commentary on these risks is: avoid. As buildings come up for renewal work, opportunity is taken to combine replacement of items at height or that would require working at height at the same time, using a contractor's access equipment, e.g. scaffolding. And maybe we've not thought about it before, but it is true, isn't it, that if you've got the scaffolding there to do something, the chances are we will all naturally look to see what other tasks can be more easily and more safely done while the scaffolding is there. It is generally not the case that small individual works are done on building fabric where this would require working at height. It is not possible to avoid all work at height, as building maintenance at height will always be required. Number 2, prevent any work at height must use scaffolding or scaffold towers. Sorry, I think there's a word missing here. I think we're talking about on roofs. Any work at height on roofs or canopies must use scaffolding or scaffold towers with handrails and kickboards, unless the work is of a very short duration and can be covered under the use of ladder arrangements above. And let's make sure, as we keep mentioning scaffold towers, that the scaffold towers have a proper complete platform on the top with kickboards and handrails all the way round. Unfortunately, I see quite a lot that a railway thinks it's brilliant because it's got a scaffold tower rather than a ladder, but there's only one scaffold plank along the top of the scaffold tower, and it only takes you to miss your step by 3 inches and you've fallen through the scaffold tower. Scaffold tower is only worth the paper it's written on if it's got a proper platform on the top, kickboards and handrails all the way around the edge. Another thing worth mentioning about station and grounds maintenance is the same as we mentioned about wagon groups further up, is quite often station groups become their own little independent kingdoms, and it's sometimes quite difficult, I think, for the central management of safety to keep control of them. But there's no excuse, and there certainly won't be any excuse if one of the members of station maintenance staff is injured. Station groups have to be brought into the fold and managed using the same policies and SMS as everybody else. Right, last few little bits in the policy, training and competence. Working at height training is provided by one of 2 approved methods. For working at height undertaken by footplate crews, guards and shunters, task-based training is provided, and unsafe working practices will be identified during observations and assessments. Specific criteria will be introduced in the next update. This is wording that I think you will probably want to use in the next update of the relevant competence management system documents to further enhance this. Obviously, if your competence management system is already so brilliant that it's already in there, then that's fantastic and you can alter that sentence, but I suspect in most cases it probably isn't. But there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that there's a bit of a gap there and saying this is essentially our plan to address it. For all other tasks involving working at height, training is provided by means of an approved e-learning course. This is being rolled out from, and you can put whatever date in there, and will become mandatory from another date for all work at height with the exception of that described in the paragraph above. That's for footplate crews, guards and shunters. And I'm not just writing this because, obviously, as you know, HOPS has produced e-learning. It's the other way around. It's that we found, or we knew that working at height training is required, and there's no doubt about that, and we thought, how can we help railways to provide this in a nice and easy way without having to pay a lot of money for it to a commercial provider. The reason why we haven't suggested it for footplate crews and guards and shunters is simply because their work at height is so task-based and doesn't really fit with the general working at height off-the-shelf training, that we didn't feel general off-the-shelf working at height training was appropriate for those risks, which is why we've said that their working at height training should go into their task-based training and into their task-based observation and competence assessments. You could require your footplate crews, guards and shunters to do the e-learning anyway. It's probably not a bad idea, especially now that HOPS has very kindly provided it to you for free. Development of the policy, the company acknowledges the need to remain vigilant to the heritage railway specific risks relating to working at height, and that it will be necessary to continually and permanently seek to further improve the risk. This policy will be updated as further reviews and developments takes place, or at least every 2 years, or perhaps that should be at most every 2 years. And this is because we're never ever going to be able to design away all the working at height risks, because we don't want to redesign our heritage locomotives and carriages and stations and things like that. If we were prepared to do that, we could design away the working at height risks, but obviously it would be a bit pointless us being here if we did so. So as always, that template will be uploaded to the workshop section at HOPS, and you are very welcome to use it in any way that you wish. Sorry, my PowerPoint's gone a bit haywire. You're more than welcome to use it in any way that you wish if you're an advanced HOPS railway. If you're not an advanced HOPS railway, then there's one very easy solution to that, and I'll be very delighted to talk to you about it. You are, of course, welcome to copy down and scribe down what you've seen on the screen if it helps. So that's the end of the template. I'll talk briefly now about some other working at height related things that we've been working on and we will be releasing imminently. Number one, as I've mentioned several times now, is e-learning is on the way. We have gone to great expense to develop e-learning so that you don't have to go and pay £5 or £10 per person from some commercial provider to get off-the-shelf working at height training that doesn't specifically relate to heritage railways. We've made specific working at height on heritage railways e-learning. Thank you very much to everyone who's been involved in the testing of that. No more volunteers for testing now. Thank you very much. I've got more than enough of those, and the feedback that you've been given has been really, really helpful in developing the e-learning. I would say within the next week or so, we'll have that out and available for everybody who's a HOPS Heritage Railway to use, as much or as little as they like. It'll record in HOPS the completion of the e-learning, and if a person works on more than one railway, it will automatically register across all their railways that they've done the working at height HOPS for e-learning for heritage railways, provided they've joined their accounts, of course. So you can encourage staff to join their accounts if they don't want to have to do the e-learning twice or 3 times on the different railways they work on. It's quite good. It takes about 20 minutes to go through. It's got lots of slides and animations and things, and then it's got some questions at the end, and they are quite interactive questions. So the one on the right-hand side there, you have to join up which of the preventative measures applies to which of the parts of the process. So using long reach tools, for example, I'm sure you're all shouting it out at the screen, is an avoid, because it avoids the need for you to work at height. If you can get a long reach tool or a long reach brush for cleaning the windows, then it avoids the need to work at height. And I really do think it is completely reasonable and appropriate that every member of staff on a heritage railway should know avoid, prevent, minimise. Maybe not every single little clause in every bit of legislation, but avoid, prevent, minimise is on every single slide almost in the e-learning, because that's the key message. We also have some lovely posters for you, which again we'll release when we put up the workshop materials. The one on the left is a general poster, just to remind everybody that the working at height policy applies to all staff, and about avoid, prevent, minimise. No working on roofs of rail vehicles without approved safety arrangements is what I've put there. It's up to you to decide what the approved safety arrangements are. And it's got our favourite tagline along the bottom: our safety performance affects all heritage railways, and the little cartoon man there, who you may recognise from the Spot Report posters, and is rapidly becoming our little cartoon safety man that we will use on HOPS-related safety posters going forward. And the purpose of that is just because it is timely, because of how focus on working at height is coming up the agenda, to remind everybody who works on the railway that there is a working at height policy and that it does apply, and that we don't expect people to be taking stupid risks that are going to either injure them or get us in trouble. And if you don't have a working at height policy, then that is your number one task for tomorrow when that template gets released, is to edit it so that it does apply to your railway and then issue it. And on the right-hand side, working at height specifically for loco crews, again, because we identified that the working at height that loco crews do is so specific and often doesn't fit in the off-the-shelf training. A poster, this one's designed to be printed in A3 so that the text comes out at the appropriate size, with some good tips for loco crews. And thank you very much to not only the driver that very kindly posed for all those photos in the working at height for loco crews posters, but all of the posed photos that have either been taken for me or by me or sent in requests to help over the last couple of weeks, and they appear in the e-learning as well. And I copied this phrase from when we did, I think it was concern raising escalation, because I think it's a really useful phrase, and it comes up again now, that we as managers cannot possibly hope to have eyes absolutely everywhere and to prevent or to avoid or prevent or minimise all lone working risks across the railway. There is only one way that we are going to achieve that, and that is by all of the other 500 volunteers that we have doing it for us. So if we empower those people to apply, avoid, prevent, minimise, and if we encourage them to challenge us, if they think that we could be doing better, or we could be looking after them better, or that the task could be done in a better way, that is the key to success in management of working at height in a heritage railway context. So it's your last few seconds now to raise any queries or comments if you want to. Thank you very much to everybody in the comments that has said hello, but not an awful lot of arguments going on in the comments today, which is unusual. Normally you've got lots of comments or queries or questions, or perhaps you're all just stunned into silence. So I'll give you your last few seconds to ask in the comments if you want to. Otherwise, thank you very much indeed, as always, to everybody who contributes to these workshops, who sends in the relevant parts of their SMS or interesting comments or lessons that they've learned in order that we can form up this best practice. You can do it anonymously if you want, either completely anonymously, I guess, through the post, or you can just say, look, Danny, I don't want to be identified in this, and that's absolutely fine. But it does really help, particularly if you've got some lesson that you've learned, or maybe you've had a working at height incident and you will be prepared to share at least the lessons learned from it, even if not the actual details of what particularly happened in your incident. This will be uploaded as soon as I possibly can to YouTube and to hops.org.uk/workshops or hops.org.au/workshops if you're in Australia. The next SMS workshop is 5 weeks from today, not 6 of course, because this is an extra one. 5 weeks from today, 7 p.m. on Tuesday the 27th of September, on the subject of competence management for signalling operators. And I've definitely called them signalling operators so as not to get bogged down in the whole signalman-signaller argument. But it is the competence for those who are going to operate signalling equipment. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. There's no exit music because I haven't got the music system here. So thank you very much. I'll speak to you all again soon, and good night.